Tonight, Mina birds repeat everything they hear, so my first question is, Mina the NDP such a neocon echo chamber? Also tonight, my first Teddy Talk had a packed house, or as Peel Health is calling it, Super Spreader Event 210211. And also tonight, spoiler alert, the last segment is a bit long, but at least I'm not singing again. You probably clicked this looking for a bear crapping in the woods, but instead you landed on the Cold Bear Report. Welcome to the Cold Bear Report. Nation, as we tape this, the past week had Groundhog Day, and I hope you caught my breaking news special on that. If you missed it, you'll find it in the Cold Bear Report Shorts playlist of my YouTube channel. As was widely reported, the groundhog didn't see his shadow, so apparently we're going to have an early spring. Great, huh? The whole nation is locked down and we'll get an early spring. It's like last year when gas prices finally came down so it was cheap enough to drive and there was nowhere to go. Yay! Mind you, it's Canada where even April is an early spring, but that's not why you called. Tonight we're going to toss a little shade on JAGMEET Singh and today's NDP, and to make that point we're going to do another installment of Bird. Well, we were going to. But the damn groundhog took out half my writing staff with COVID, so instead we're just going to show these bits of JAGMEET Singh verbally dancing around, not answering any questions. Jimmy?
I know that you're worried. I know that you're worried about your kids going to school. I know that you're worried about paying the bills. I know you're worried about your jobs. I know you're worried about your loved ones and our elders in long-term care homes. And I know you're seeing the numbers rising and you're worried about a second wave.
NDP rule number 1. They go fear, we go worry about fear.
I want you to know that like we've done throughout this pandemic, we see you, we hear you, and we're going to keep fighting for you. And I know people are worried about how we're going to pay for all of this. I know it's not your fault. You shouldn't have to pay for this pandemic. Those who profited off the pandemic should be paying the price. We need a wealth tax. The wealthy must pay their fair share, those at the very top. When we saw students were missed out entirely, we fought for students.
NDP rule number 2. Avoid answering a question no matter how many times it's asked.
I've been spending a lot of time speaking with Canadians. Spoken with parents who are worried about their kids, spoken to grocery workers who are worried, spoken to restaurant owners.
Yeah, so Parliament was temporarily suspended and replaced by a COVID committee. That committee required unanimous consent to pass motions.
The Prime Minister of Canada would look those people in their eyes and say, but we're going to an election because I don't like a committee.
So the opposition took turns blocking government support measures for Canadians in the pandemic.
The only way there is an election right now is because the Prime Minister chooses to have one.
And the delay stopped only after Trudeau made a Conservative motion a confidence matter.
Are you going to support the Conservative motion, yes or no?
What's become more and more clear to me is that the Prime Minister is not looking for a solution here. The Prime Minister is looking for an excuse to go to an election. And I will not give the Prime Minister an excuse to go to an election.
The confidence motion forced the opposition to either help Canadians or have an election, otherwise known as face the voter.
Every politician I've talked to today, and I've talked to every leader, has made it very clear that they don't want an election. But the fact of the matter is, if you join the Bloc and the Conservatives tomorrow and vote for the Conservative Opposition Day motion, we're headed to an election. So I'll give you another opportunity. Is the NDP going to vote for or against the motion?
JAGMEET Singh's NDP was then polling so low, an election would have cost him at least a third of the seats he had in Parliament.
As leader, I've said this to Canadians again and again. I am not interested in posturing to find a way to put our country into an election.
But he was interested in posturing on demands he knew would play well with his base but which could never get Conservative or Bloc support to pass unanimously.
I am all about fighting for you. The Prime Minister is looking for an excuse. So if there is an election, it is going to be because the Prime Minister has found a way to do it. And what he should do is just come out and tell people, hey, I want an election. If he wants an election, he should just go out and say it. I don't.
Justin wanted to break the deadlock on responding to COVID. There's no evidence he ever wanted an election.
I'm not sure that we've heard a clear answer from you on the Conservative motion. So can we stick to that? And can you tell us, would your party support that motion as it is written?
I will not let the Prime Minister use this discussion over committee as an excuse to go to an election. I will not be any part of this farce that this Prime Minister is suggesting that this is what's important. So what's important is people who are afraid for the future. That's what's important here, not trying to posture to get an election over a committee. Like, that is stupid, to be blunt.
The other three party leaders have made very clear where they stand on this motion. The Liberals have made clear that they view it as a confidence vote. Why can't you give us a clear answer on how you'll vote on it tomorrow?
When would ever any government think that an opposition day motion and a discussion around committees is in any way justifiable to risk an election over?
You know, the whole point of a minority is that without the confidence of a majority of the members in the House of Commons, a minority government must defer to the electorate to continue.
Like, the people I've spoke to are worried and afraid. So no, I'm not going to be a part of that. I'm not going to be a part of giving the Prime Minister an excuse. If he wants to if he wants to have an election, if there's an election, it's going to be because of Prime Minister Trudeau. It's not going to be because of me.
Curious, you keep saying that you're not going to play a part in the farce, I believe, ludicrous farce, the very many words that you used. But with all due respect, you have to play a part. Your party's going to be called on to vote on this motion. So are you saying you're going to abstain? Your party's not going to vote on the motion? Is that how you are not going to play a part? Can you be a bit more clear on what you mean, I am not going to play a part?
Ugh. One press conference, one question, 7 repeated avoidances. Good job, JAGMEET.
It is entirely the Prime Minister that has set this up. It is not on anyone else. And that's why I'm trying to flip the question. It is not about the opposition here. Like, it is ludicrous that a government would say an opposition day motion on holding them to account is somehow a confidence motion. I don't want one. I'm very clear. I'm not trying to find a way to go to an election. Prime Minister Trudeau is trying to create an excuse to go to an election. We're not about that.
I think the translation on this is I won't answer a simple question because the truth proves I'm ineffective. As for that repeating question, well, once more, en français!
Vraiment, le Premier ministre du Canada essaie maintenant de plonger le pays dans une élection en pleine deuxième vague à cause d'un comité.
Ugh, JAGMEET. If you're not part of the solution, then you're part of the problem.
Is the NDP willing to move on either of those two asks or negotiate with the government on those two specific things to prevent an election, essentially?
Well, and I want to make it clear, it's not actually on us to prevent the election. Like, the Prime Minister is setting this up because he wants an election.
So what ended up happening? Well, the opposition blinked, the NDP backed down, and there was no election.
Other leaders have been asked this question today. Do you have confidence in the government?
But I have confidence in our team that fought back, and I have confidence in our ability to keep on fighting and doing that. One of the major things he promised to us, committed to us, was help to people living with disabilities. And we fought to get them some help, and we're going to continue to fight for those things.
NDP rule number 3, always ask for the impossible, particularly when you won't let anyone actually discuss it.
Will the Prime Minister extend the CERB for families in need? Yes or no?
We are proposing 3 significant helps for Canadians this afternoon. For Canadians with disabilities, expanding the wage subsidy for more businesses, creating flexibility for the CERB, and he doesn't even want to debate those things. He doesn't want to be even voting on them.
You're the guy who frankly extended this special COVID committee so you can't have irregular sittings and you can't have debate and you can't now table legislation without unanimous consent. Those literally was the bargain you struck with the Liberals. Do you regret that now?
No, not at all. I think what happened is, to help Canadians with disabilities, they then last minute put forward a change to talk just about Canadians with disabilities, which we did support. And in that case, it was the Conservatives that voted against that unanimous consent motion.
How is this the government's fault when opposition parties take turns killing motions that require unanimous consent? Seriously, Jagmeet, are you new to this?
I'm frustrated that the Liberals have taken so long to get help out to Canadians in need.
They need unanimous consent. Now, the Bloc's making demands. They need a fiscal update. They need to make sure that other parties aren't dipping into the wage subsidy. The Conservatives have. They can't get unanimous consent. The need for unanimous consent, not only to fast track, but then to debate the bill, is only necessary because of the COVID committee. If there was a regular sitting of Parliament, you guys could debate legislation. It's a minority government. Something may have been done. Given that, do you regret that this format has now taken hold?
No, it's not about the format. I regret the fact that the Liberals aren't willing to help out Canadians in need. They seem to be caught up in I don't know what, but they're not willing to work with us to achieve that.
NDP rule number 4, never let an unproved Conservative conspiracy go to waste.
Should the Prime Minister resign?
Our focus right now is the fact that this goes beyond just the Prime Minister. It wouldn't be enough to just target the Prime Minister when we know that there is clear evidence that links the Finance Minister. There's clear evidence that also links the Chief of Staff of the Liberal government. So the connections here are very clear that this is not just a matter of one person, that this is the Liberal government that is at question in terms of their working for their close friends instead of working for Canadians. So
yeah, seeing as the WE scandal has been repeatedly proven to be without merit, I wonder how many times Jagmeet and Charlie Angus of the NDP apologized or even acknowledged there was nothing to the Conservative claims of corruption.
we want to get to the truth. We want to get to the bottom of this. That's our focus. And then once we get all the evidence, there may need to be some additional steps taken then.
Yeah, 0, as predicted. I can't wait for the next fake outrage. I'm guessing it'll be something with China or someone else's genocide. Seriously, if I tried nailing down this sort of jello, I'd be screaming by now.
Multiple resignations is what you're looking at.
Thank you so much. That's a wrap.
Oh, there we are. Yeah, why is it every time we do these, I feel like I need a bath? Ugh.
Excuse me, pardon me, excuse me, pardon me, excuse me, excuse me. Sissy, take it? Okay.
Thank you, and welcome for joining me on this very first Teddy Bear Talks. Now, they used to say that as Quebec voted, so voted Canada. I'll put forward the argument that that phrase is still 100% true later, but for now, I want to talk about why the Conservative Party of Canada loves the NDP so much. But does it, you ask? Surely the Conservatives hate the NDP because they actually are the evil socialists trying to destroy society the Conservatives love to bleat on about. You did ask that, right? No? Well, nation, the answer is no. Conservatives only will ever claim that liberals are the evil socialists trying to destroy society, even though there are at least 3 other parties further left than Justin's. And that's because the Conservative Party knows they'll never lose an election to the NDP, the Bloc, or Green Party. They know this because the Reform Party spent almost 20 years trying to prove it wrong. They changed their name 3 times, and finally gave up because they couldn't make it happen. Although how they missed this one is beyond me. It took a hostile takeover of the actual Conservative banner in 2003 to even come close. And they did that because reformers realized Canadians will only ever elect a Conservative or Liberal government. And since all the reform white pride has clung to the party like dirty toilet paper on a shoe, while their support is rock solid, it's also the same percent of the population every election. Which is why cons love the NDP so much, because the party of Ed Broadbent, Jack Layton and Kiefer Sutherland's granddad, serve a very important function. They put conservatives in power. And for that, we need pie. Oh, really? I've been hankering for a pecan pie all week. Stick with what's on the teleprompter, Bear. Fine. So here's a pie chart of voting intentions for both America and Canada. Based on election results, you'd think it's pretty straightforward. America seems evenly divided, 50-50, while Canada is mostly either conservative or liberal, with the bloc dominant in Quebec, and the rest voting NDP or other, in a few select areas, green. No! And if that were true, there'd be no point in having an election, since the results would always be the same. But thankfully, some people aren't that predictable, and those free thinkers are called the undecided. In America, that's a chunk that can be swayed to vote for or against a party, and often they don't decide which to do until election day. It's a bit more fluid in Canada, with 5 political parties across the spectrum and the Liberals historically capturing much of the centrist vote. But of course, even America isn't as cut and dry as it seems. There are die-hard Democrats and Republicans, but also large numbers of leaning Democrats or Republicans. Those people are called swing voters. And each party tries to get that group to switch their vote, or in areas where that isn't going to happen, or isn't likely to happen, suppress it through gerrymandering or restrictive voting laws and false claims of fraud. Yeah. We saw that a lot this last presidential election, didn't we? Meanwhile, in Canada, the fight is for the anybody but conservative crowd. Some of those have voted Liberal but aren't really committed to the party. They're the easiest to sway, but sway them they must. With conservatives polling more than 60% throughout the prairies, they can pretty much bank on getting all those seats without even campaigning. That's why voters in Alberta only see politicians on TV or at Stampede breakfasts. Well, Liberal support is spread out nearly evenly across the country, so Liberals have to show up and fight for every win in every riding, or they lose that seat to the NDP, Green, Bloc, and sometimes Conservative. Since they can't sway the undecided, or the anybody but conservative crowd, the only hope conservatives have to win is to go after liberal-leaning voters, but not to get their vote, to suppress the liberal vote. And the only 2 ways to do that are discouraging liberals from voting, or getting them to vote NDP, which is why if the NDP or Bloc bring up a concern in the House of Commons, the Conservatives adopt it like it was their own. It's also why JAGMEET Singh and Charlie Angus of the NDP repeat Conservative claims so often you'd think they'd cross the floor. Because when both parties attack the Liberals, it bleeds votes off the only competition they have, Trudeau and the Liberal Party. And Conservatives don't care if you think all politicians are vile. Their base is voting for them regardless. That's what happens when you convince almost 30% of the population in a country that everyone else is a baby-eating socialist. So getting not conservatives to reject both liberals and conservatives not only helps conservatives form government, but they get the bonus of a useless opposition. And that's the most dangerous part, because as much as people loved Jack Layton, the Conservatives racked up over 50 scandals while the NDP was the official opposition, and the NDP failed to hold Harper accountable for any of them. No. In fact, there were only 2 times Harper was held accountable between 2011 and 2015, the years of his majority government. The first was when Liberal Speaker of the House Peter Milliken ruled Harper in contempt of Parliament. And the second was when Canadians gave Justin Trudeau's Liberal government a majority to replace him. The 4 years between those 2 events had the weakest opposition to a government in Canadian history, Jack Layton's NDP. And even though the NDP was the official opposition the entire time Harper had a majority, and one would therefore presume was his biggest threat in 2015, the only party Harper attacked in the 2015 election was the then third-place Liberal Party. Because both the NDP and Conservatives know Liberals who don't vote Liberal elect Conservative governments and NDP oppositions. So you'll never hear the Conservatives rail against the NDP, even if JAGMEET Singh forms the next official opposition, because in neocon circles, The enemy of my enemy is my NDP. Thank you. We'll be right back.
Excuse me, pardon me, excuse me, pardon me, pardon me. Excuse me, pardon me, pardon me. Excuse me, pardon me, Oh dear, nothing there, excuse me, pardon me.
Based on articles in the Top Secret Conservative Handbook, get your free ebook at titanrainbow.com/ebook.html. Not a sponsor. Well, Nation, that's all for the Colbert Report this week. Take care, stay safe, and watch out for wildlife on the roads.